Hey there fellow creators, Ben here from Cinder Studios, and this week it's part 2 of how I make a painting. Stick around. So in part 1 we discussed the sketch phase and the idea phase, taking stuff from just really basic, vague concepts, refining that down into something a little bit more of a usable sketch, and doing a color concept if need be. Now that we have that sketch, the next important step is sort of the picking a canvas size and prepping it as need be. Now, when it comes to choosing a particular size of canvas or wood panel or whatever I happen to paint on, I tend to focus on a couple of factors. First, what is the general complexity of the design? Would it fit better on a smaller scale or a bigger scale? For a piece like this, I think something in kind of the smaller middle range is going to be good. The overall composition doesn't really lend itself to needing a lot of space for a lot of details. There's a lot of big stone slabs with this, and so for that reason I'd like to just keep that on a slightly smaller scale in order to play a little bit more with gradients and colors and glazes, which I think work better, at least for me in my personal work, on a smaller scale. Now, in this corner of my studio is where I keep all of my extra canvas and wood panels and things like that. I have a lot of things out and everywhere right now, so I got to do some little bit of configuring. It's also very early in the morning and the sun's coming in, so it's very warm, or very bright, so I do apologize for the overexposed lighting here. So I was thinking of something kind of like this, which I believe is a 12 by 24. Now this I already have prepped and ready to go for a different piece, so it's not going to be on this one. But I do have a lot of other options. And that's what I love about having a lot of things here in my corner, is because I have a lot of options, and those options mean I don't have to worry about not having what I need when I need it, usually. So I do often stretch my own canvas, so I buy the regular stretcher bars that you can get at your local, sometimes your local art store. You usually have to go to a bigger art store like a Blick. For that, I have a big roll of loose canvas, which I stretch and then prime myself with a big bucket of gesso. I don't use the whole big bucket, I have a big bucket, is what I'm saying. Anyway, so there are those. There are certain found wood panels and supports. This was just, I think this was a shelf at some point in time. I sanded this down. It's really smooth. It probably needs a little heavier sanding if I were to actually use this to paint on it. But the composition, at least for this piece, isn't going to lend itself to this taller aspect ratio. I want something that's just a little bit thinner. Now to compensate for this, in a lot of pieces I've actually created these black bars, which may end up looking like a widescreen movie kind of deal, which is really cool, but I don't think I want to do that for this piece. And I will occasionally buy little canvas boards to practice on, sometimes some bigger gallery wrap ones, which I have in the back. But for this particular piece, I was actually at the art store yesterday and grabbed this 10 by 20 inch studio style stretch canvas, and I think that'll work perfectly for this project. So when it comes down to the prep work, for a store-bought canvas, again, looking for something pretty simple here. Just grab something off the shelf, you're ready to go. Obviously for a canvas I'm stretching myself, again, I have to roll out the canvas, cut it, pull it, stretch it, staple it, the whole 9 yards, but I'm not doing that for this particular piece. I will clear off my table, at least with whatever I'm currently working on, since I have literally 4 projects going on at once right now. Have a little bit more clearing to do. Down to just what I'm working on for this piece. Now, one thing I do want to do with this, which I think would be fairly effective and a good practice and way to share some of the other process here, is to tint this canvas. Now, a lot of people will say that whether you're getting a store-bought canvas or you are stretching it yourself, actually a lot of people say this, but specifically with store-bought canvases, is you have to gesso them. Well, granted, you do have to gesso your stone raw canvas from scratch. You under no circumstances have to gesso something that is already gessoed by the store. That's ridiculous. But it is a personal preference some artists have. Interestingly, I'm actually noticing there's a little bit of sag in this canvas already, in which case I might key it before we get started. Now, when tinting a canvas, some people will do a tinted layer of gesso. I'm actually not going to do that myself, at least for this particular piece. I do want to give it some kind of texture, though, a little bit of extra color before I get started. Now, because I will be using some reds in this piece, I'm actually going to go with some reds as my tint. So I'm going to grab some GAC 100 and a little naphtha crimson ink, and a decent amount of water for this too, because I just want to keep it loose and pink. So I'll throw some of that on. That's just fluid acrylic extender. I'll throw a few squirts of ink down there for the tint. Get a nice slop of water on this little 2-inch house painter brush and just spread that crap around. Yeah, I've got a lot of sag in here, which is really quite interesting. It's a cheaper canvas though, so can't really complain. That's pretty much all I'm thinking tint-wise. Keep these vertical. I'm actually going to do a little bit with where my lines are to kind of start giving myself an indication of where all that's going on for the composition. And then I'll just let that dry. Okay, once my tint layer is completely dry, I will come in, or whether I did a tint layer or not, I will come in with my gray paint marker. This is a neutral gray 5. And I will just give myself a basic layout and sketch of the composition based on the sketch. So holding my sketchbook off to the side, I'll just start dropping in just the basic idea of that same piece. Sketch or whatever happens to be, you know. The vast majority of this, I know for a fact, will be covered up, so it really doesn't matter if I'm super accurate here. It's just basically a general visual and mental guide to give myself an idea of where these shapes are. But within the first layer of paint, the vast majority of this won't even exist, so it almost seems silly to do it, but for me, it really kind of helps me figure out exactly where I want those objects. And using gray, I can easily cover it up. If I was using black, or I got away a while back from using just like regular graphite pencils, is because that graphite will mix into that paint and make it muddy. So I tend to avoid using graphite pencils for that reason. On rare occasion, I will specifically choose to use a pencil, knowing that it does do that. But generally speaking, it's not really something I'm trying to do. Because I paint the edges, a little stuck down here. Make sure to put those guides all the way up or all the way down, respectively. That's really about all I do prep-wise. Yeah, just figuring all that out with where those shapes are going to be, and basic perspective lines and all that. And just like that, I think I'd be about ready to go. So as far as canvas prep goes, I think we're ready to get started, but we're not going to be doing that this week. We're going to be doing that in part 3. So compared to the initial sketch portion of this is actually probably the fastest and easiest part of this process. Finding the right canvas and sketching that out and doing any kind of additional little bits of prep, not really complicated, but it definitely makes things a lot easier down the road. And I definitely think you guys will see that, especially when we get started in part 3 on the actual piece. So, as always, if you learned anything or found this entertaining, go ahead and hit that like button. Let me know your thoughts in comments below. If there's any other canvas prep stuff I didn't really mention or talk about or show in this one, let me know. If you're having any problems with that, we can certainly help you through those. That's going to be it for part 2, though. Look for the actual painting process starting in part 3. This has been from Cinder Studios, reminding you to keep on creating, and I will see you guys next time. I don't know why it looks so weird and dark from there. Maybe it's not, and I'm just getting screwed. I don't know. It looks off.